Hey everybody, thanks so much for reaching out to us in regard to the pros and cons of a last will and testament. And so many of you just call these simply just a will. But the legal name is a last will and testament. And it's a document that usually is going to give direction on what happens after your death. And so just like everything, I want you to learn enough to be dangerous and not give you any types of recommendations on which one, because it's hard to do it in a generalized form. I think you would agree, but at least give you pros and cons. So what is the first pro of a last will and testament? So the first pro is that it's cheap to set up. So I say, yeah, we're going to spend a little bit of money now. And the con is that it's expensive later. And the reason why, so I'll draw a big dollar sign here. So we have a little upfront costs. And when you pass away, then your heirs are going to have to pay a lot more money. And what they're going to do is paying probate. And so that's also a con because of the process. And I'll give you an idea of how these kind of two relate to each other. So probate in Florida is 3% of the value. So you think about it, many of your financial accounts can have beneficiaries on there. And you could have, Todd Seymour, payable upon death. So for banks, it's POD, payable upon death. It could be payable upon death to my wife. And there's no probate. If I pass away, she takes over because it has a beneficiary. The problem a lot of times is that with real property, like your house, you can't have a beneficiary in many states. Florida, again, is one in particular because we have homestead protection, so you're not allowed to have a beneficiary. And because of that, your largest asset would have to go through probate. So think, if I have a $200,000 house at 3%, I'm going to pay $6,000 in probate. Where, again, yeah, I paid a little bit to set it up, a few $100s. It's going to cost a heck of a lot more at the end. So you got to be cautious on, again, it's the old being penny wise, pound foolish. So the other pro on a last will is at least it gives some distribution direction, we'll call it. And what I mean by that is, hey, when I pass away, it's going to give my wife and my kids, it's going to leave money to them, so at least there is a beneficiary on there, again, after going through probate. So let's talk a little bit quickly about why things even need to be probated, because it's, if it's one of the most expensive things that needs to be done with a will, you need to know what it is. So here's an awesome picture of me. And remember, we're not known by Todd Seymour, we're known by our social security number. And usually assets, right, are legally placed in that social security number. They're not placed technically in the name of yourself, they are, but they're identified by your social security number. And let's say down the road I pass away, I will pass away, and now I need to get that asset over to my wife. And my wife obviously has her own social security number. And so how do I get assets from my social security number over to hers? Well, that process is called probate. And, a lot of clients have misconceptions too, that if I have an account that's just in my name and I'm married and I pass away, that there's not going to be any probate. And that's absolutely not the case, unless it's a joint account. If it's a joint account, there's no probate, because if one of you passes away, the survivor takes that asset. And so that's the process of probate. It's just basically taking things out of my social and putting it into my wife's social. That's probate. Simple as that. And many people don't understand why it's so expensive, and it's because there's paperwork. And so let's go to the third con is not only paperwork, but the biggest thing is time. And so to probate is usually 9 to 12 months. So if you, the thing I find all the time, again, going back to this example where our house was $200,000 and we had to probate it. We had a client, we have many clients, but one in particular who did a simple thing. We had her account in a trust, refinance the house. The title company did not put it back into the trust. They actually kept it in the individual's name. They pass away and there's probate. And so again, that cost the client $6,000 because of the title company not putting it back into the trust like they should have. The worst part was that the beneficiaries could not even take title to it until 9 to 12 months, and therefore they couldn't sell it. And what happens if that client passed away in 2008, let's say, and the housing market is crashing and you got to sit and wait for almost a year for probate? So it's a very frustrating process going through it. So the other pro on a last will and testament is it's easy. And the reason why it's easy, because it basically says, hey, I, Todd Seymour, whoever individually, are going to leave all my money outright to my wife or kids or whoever. So you can give some distribution. That's very limited. The con is that you can't hold back distribution. And so what does that mean? So let's say I have 3 children and 2 of them are fantastic and 1 of them is a little iffy. So I jokingly tell clients, if you've got more than 1 child, there's usually a problem somewhere. And so let's say one of my children has a drug problem or spends money like it's water. And if they inherit that third, they're just going to blow right through that money. Well, a last will and testament doesn't give you, it only gives you some direction. You can't hold the money back. And by that I mean, so I pass away and my wife is going to get some of the money and then the kids are going to get some of the money, and that 1/3 child, when they inherit it, there's no control. You can't really, tell the child not to do whatever it is with the money. So hopefully this gives you a little bit, direction on pros and cons and so forth. It is, you could see where I kind of lean. Maybe you're getting it from my I'm not a huge fan of last wills and testaments because of the fact that to me, again, yeah, you're paying a little bit now, but boy, you're going to pay a lot more in the long run. And I think the one thing I'll leave you with is that, you got to remember how hard you work for your assets. And so while you won't reap the benefits, that's sometimes the frustrating thing about doing estate planning, is that technically you're not going to reap any of the benefits because none of this happens until you pass away. And I have some clients will say, well, what do I care what happens? And I say, because you worked so hard for it. You made so many sacrifices for all this money. You really should think about a process of, what's going to benefit not only yourself, alleviate stress from your family too. So thank you so much. If you have any comments, questions, input, I'll take it all. I love it. It's taxandtrusthelp@gmail.com. Thanks so much for visiting and have a great day.